Hi.
Right.
Hi,
Hey,
everybody.
Annalisa.
Hi, Natasha. Hi. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Everyday Goddess on Journey to the Goddess TV and soon to be on other channels as well. You're gonna be uploading to your channel as well,
I
right,
am
Natasha?
eventually, but let's just
Yeah.
say Journey to the Goddess TV right now. But yes.
Okay. Um, so my name's Annalisa, and this is
And
Natasha.
I am Tasha. Yeah.
And before we jump in today, it's been a few weeks since we've been all here all together live, or maybe you're catching this after the live. But before we get in, I wanted to give a dedication today, an in memoriam, to two incredible women that transitioned last week. And one of them, her name is Carol P. Christ. And she was a early mother of the goddess movement, of the modern day goddess spirituality movement. She was a feminist theologian, and she lived in Crete and gave Ariadne tours there. And my heart's a little sad because I was looking forward to meeting her one day and interviewing her on my channel. But I'm so grateful to know her work and that she lived and shared her, brilliance with us. And then another woman who left us way too young, Aisha K. Faines. She was a journalist and a writer. I originally found her because I was doing some research on Afro-Cuban Orisha dances, and she does that dance, and she did this incredible, like 20-minute video on Oshun and Orisha dance. And she also had a business called Women Love Power, in which she kind of put forth all these really great ideas about different feminine archetypes, and was really working with kind of reclaiming this idea of feminine power from an empowered perspective. So she died last week as well. That was also really shocking because she was 35. We but she also blessed us with her wisdom. So I encourage everyone to check both of them out, both of their work out. And I just really want to honor and respect them in life and in this next phase, wherever they are, merged back with the great consciousness of everything. Thank you, Natasha, for giving me the space to start with the dedication.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. That's what Everyday Goddess is about. For those of you who are new to this space, Everyday Goddess is really about honoring the goddess, honoring feminine energy, the divine feminine, the wisdom traditions of the divine feminine in our everyday lives. And so it's absolutely about honoring the women who have been here, who have gone before us, who have given us the recipe for how to do this. So thank you for honoring them and the dedication to them. But Annalisa and I, we have collaborated to create this Everyday Goddess space. And essentially, like I said, what it is it's a space. When we think about the goddess, sometimes it can seem like this kind of lofty, abstract kind of idea, but really the idea of being a goddess, the idea of like the divine feminine, the idea of like recognizing the importance of women and what they contribute is an everyday practice. And so we wanted to, in this space, talk about that in terms that are like metaphysical and academic and scholarly, but also then bring it very down to like the earth, bring it to the earth, and to think about how we do that every day, like how we honor our divine mother, how we honor the divine feminine, its contribution. And so that's what this space is. So I don't know, Annalisa, I can throw it back to you to maybe introduce today's theme, and then we'll kind of talk about that. But yeah.
Yeah. So when Natasha and I started Everyday Goddess, it was on Clubhouse. And one of the days that I couldn't make it, she had this amazing, from what I heard, conversation on feminine embodiment and sensuality and sexuality. And I was so bummed to miss it. So I suggested that we have it again together here on YouTube. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and how that shows up through the divine feminine and goddesses, and what goddesses we like to, or that we kind of access or relate to, that help us in our feminine embodiment, I guess.
Yep. So just to give a little bit of background, like a lot of women, Annalisa and I do a lot of different things. We wear a lot of different hats, but Annalisa is a goddess scholar, and she's pursuing a doctorate. She's pursuing her PhD in like goddess studies and scholarship. And actually, she's in the midst of writing a dissertation right now. And I don't know if you know, I don't know, because I've not written a dissertation, but I've had lots of friends who have, and it's an extremely like rigorous process. But she's in the process of that. She's also an actress, a dancer. I'm an educator. I'm a writer, an activist. But where we intersect is that we are really committed to this idea of the divine feminine and the goddess and that kind of work. And so today we are talking about the body and grounding and sensuality and what that means. And one of the things we talked about is how to set the foundation for this conversation, because there's a lot to kind of wade through in this conversation. So we're like, how do we do that in this little bit of time that we have? But one of the things that I thought was really important to even lay the groundwork for this conversation was to understand the difference between two different terms, and that's transcendence and imminence. And so I understand that for some people that might be like, what are those? What does that mean? And so when we think about spirituality and we think about religion or just kind of those spiritual spaces, a lot of times, a lot of the doctrine or things around how to access those spaces are around this idea of like you get out of your body, right? So you, in order to become more spiritual, you meditate, or you abstain from sex, or you fast, or you do all of these things that are like very mental, and they're not meant to connect you to your body, right? Like you're going to do these things that take you out of your body and take you to this kind of like abstract, ethereal place where you have like gone past your body to access the spiritual space. And that's a really important space. Like I am a meditator, I fast, I do those things that kind of take me out of my body. But there's also this spiritual space that's not talked about as often. So the first space I talked about was just transcendence. Like you transcend your body. You go beyond your body and you're in this ether that's outside of your body, and you're not eating, you're not having sex, you're not doing anything in your body. But there's another spiritual space called imminence, where you access the spiritual space through your body. So you might be dancing, or you might be making love, or you might be eating some really good food, or you might be just really in this space where you are in your body, you're in this very earthly space and having a spiritual experience. And so transcendence is kind of leaving your body for the spiritual experience, and imminence is using your body to experience a spiritual experience. And we're going to have a whole different episode about that, because this is like a whole different thing to unpack. But I wanted to kind of lay that groundwork because a lot of our religious institutions right now really promote a transcendence experience. They promote this idea of like you have to leave your body. And the divine feminine tradition is typically about embodiment. It's about like, how do I feel in my body, and who am I experiencing, and how am I experiencing it? What does it feel like and smell like and taste like? And that to me is sensuality. So I just wanted to kind of lay that groundwork. I'll throw it to you, Annalisa, but that's kind of where I am on this conversation.
Yeah. This is, I think, a fun conversation that you and I have started to have. And I want to add just one little piece. And the way that I was originally introduced to these concepts was through feminist theology. And so it's like through, again, yeah, the goddess traditions, there's this kind of pushing back against, let's say, traditional Christianity, for example, in traditional Christianity, this idea that God is somewhere out there, outside of the world, the divine is outside of the world and acts upon the world. Whereas in goddess tradition, right, or paganism, all these different kind of animistic, I'm not sure I said that right,
That's it.
animistic,
Yes.
animistic, yeah, religions or worldviews. The divine is in everything. The divine spark is in me. It's in that insect. It's in the flower. It's in those wind chimes. It's in the wind. It's in everything. And that's also what I understand is behind that concept of namaste. It's I honor the divine in you and me. And that's why, yeah, it's like person to person, but you could do that to the cat. I mean, in Hinduism, they honor the cows, right? And anyway, my friend Mala, Dr. Mala, who I interviewed on the channel, she actually has a section in one of our talks where she talks about the divinity of the cow from the Hindu perspective. So anyway, there's, like Natasha just said, there's so much to unpack there. And I think we will do that one of these days. But we just wanted to, like you said, lay the groundwork.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up. That's exactly the phrase that I was looking for. Like, God is like right here. Like, so for a lot of the religions and a lot of the traditions that we follow today, it's this idea that God is this external force. It's out there. We got to like leave our experience and leave our body, and we got to like try to find this, as opposed to like God is every day. Like, God is in my body. God is in my interactions with other people. God is in me cooking in my kitchen. It's in me like, right, like all these things. It's right. It's like right here. And so when we talk about the divine feminine, and this is another thing that we always do in Everyday Goddess, because anytime we talk about feminine and masculine, it's always this conversation about gender, right? And if you're talking about feminine, who are you talking about? And if you're talking about masculine, so one of the things that, and Annalisa talks about this really well, when she talks about the Hindu traditions where there's like Shakti and Shiva. But there's this feminine and masculine are energies. They're energies. They're not genders. We have made them genders as people because we have these constructs. We have racial constructs and we have gender constructs. But on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, it's energy, right? And so you can have someone who's gendered as a woman who has a lot of divine, like masculine energy, right? You can have someone who's considered on a gender level a man who has divine feminine energy. So it's not this thing about gender; it's about energy. And so divine feminine energy is creative energy. It's expansive energy. It's connected energy, and so and it's also about like embodiment. Like, it's this idea of like divinity and spirituality is not out there, but it's right here with us, and it's in our connections with other people. It's with our connections with our bodies. And so today we're kind of talking about sensuality and embodiment. And I know for me in my spiritual journey very early on, I was very much about transcendence, because that's what I was taught. Like, right, I got to leave my body. My body should be ignored. And so I would like ignore my body's needs. I wouldn't sleep when I needed to sleep. I wouldn't rest. I would just like kind of push my body to these limits because I didn't really recognize my body as a place of divinity. And in getting into the divine feminine work, I started to realize like, no, my body is a divine space. Like, eating when I need to eat and sleeping when I need to sleep and touching and all those things are like, those are part of like a spiritual divinity. And so I guess that's my question that I'll throw out there for both of us, Annalisa, is like, what does sensuality and embodiment mean to you in terms of like the divine feminine tradition? And then Annalisa is a scholar who studies lots of like goddesses and just kind of those symbolic and their metaphorical significance in this. So like what goddesses for you embody that or help you to kind of like reconnect with that when you forget?
Yeah, great question. Again, I'm really excited about this topic. And I think I didn't realize it until maybe like an hour ago, but I really think that that this is a really timely topic, especially because yesterday was Mary Magdalene's feast day. And that's another thing about me. And
Mary Magdalene, really quick, for people who don't know who Mary Magdalene is, just real quick, and her feast day. Just really quick. I know, because I know you can go
always like
whole thesis about it. I know you can, but just quickly, who is Mary Magdalene?
Yeah.
And what is her feast day? Just really quick. Like
yeah, absolutely. And for the record, I did meet one person once who didn't know who Mary Magdalene was, and I was
there's
shocked.
lots of people who don't. So
okay, so in the Christian tradition, she's one of the women in the Bible, and she's there at the foot of the cross when Jesus is crucified. She's there at the tomb to check on him, anoint his body. There's kind of a few different tomb scenes depending on which book you're looking at. And so, okay, there's a long history. The Western Christian Church branded her a prostitute as a way to delegitimize her and her power and her place within Christian Church. And in doing that to her, like she became a symbol of, female danger, basically. And it was a way to delegitimize women's authority blanketly within Christianity over time. And so, and I just want to say that the branding of her as a prostitute did not happen in the Eastern Christian Church. Okay, so now we know that she was not a prostitute officially. There's a lot of scholarship that has affirmed that. The Vatican came out in 1969 and they were like, oops, we made a mistake, that didn't happen. And then a few years ago, I think it was 2016, she was officially given the title of apostle to the apostles. So they recognized her importance. I mean, she's the first person who saw his risen form, within the tradition, and was told to go tell everybody what happened. So she is the apostle to the apostle. And then the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which is a non-canonical text, even further amplifies her important role as a teacher, as his confidant. I mean, and that's maybe more, maybe his wife, we don't know. Okay. It's all within the realm of possibility. So that kind of in a small nutshell is who she is. I like to talk about her sometimes in terms of a living presence as well, because she kind of takes on that role as like a spirit guide for me, as I think she does for many, many women. And so I think, so the reason that, so the feast day too, really quickly. So the feast day in the Christian church, again, there's two different feast day systems, Western and Eastern. It's a day to honor the saints, their role in Christianity. So every saint has a day dedicated to them, where there's, rituals and singing and chanting dedicated to them. I kind of think of it as like Mary Magdalene's birthday. So I honor her in that way. So that's what a feast day is. And if your name happens to be Mary or some kind of derivative of Magdalene, then in a traditional family, you would probably get gifts that day because you were named after that saint. So, and actually it's today the 26th. No, the 26th is the saint day of Anna, who is Jesus's grandmother in the tradition. So that's my saint. I wasn't purposely named after her, but here we are. Anyway, so back to Mary Magdalene. I just got really excited. So for me, I've done a lot of work with her since since she kind of showed up in my life and started to guide me. And I first went on pilgrimage to her sites in 2014. And I felt this very strong presence of divine feminine love. Like she presents so much love and devotion. And I would say that that was kind of the first core layer of the divine feminine that I felt deeply inside of me. So because she was branded a prostitute, and I don't want to unpack all of that, which I've done a little bit in other talks, but it's a really big topic. But what I want to say is that, the prostitution was a way to delegitimize her because women's sexuality was seen as sexuality generally, but specifically women's sexuality was seen as sinful, was seen as a problem for men, because it triggered men's lust and men's desire and sexuality, not in all Christian, because there were many Christian churches, especially in the beginning, different schools of thought. But in most of them, and what kind of became the dominant Christian church, church, we'll just say church and theology, was that sex, except for procreation, was sinful, problematic. Women were devilish, temptresses. And so Mary Magdalene came to embody all of that, especially when she was opposed with, the virginal, putting that in quotes, Mother Mary. And a lot of other things to unpack there as well, but we won't. So my work with Mary Magdalene has become a way for me to find a way to reclaim female embodiment as powerful through the female gaze from a feminine perspective. So a lot of times what we'll see is in a patriarchal culture, even one such as ours, we learn to view women through a specific set of eyes and sexualize women through a specific set of eyes that are kind of colored by either male desire or male perspectives on what a woman should be, what a woman should look like, how she should behave, what her sexuality should be and look like. And so women learn to self-objectify ourselves, to see ourselves through that lens, and then to present ourselves to the world as these sexual objects that may or may not resonate with our authentic sexuality or sensuality. And so from my perspective, how we've seen Mary Magdalene presented to the world as a model of the dangerous feminine, the dangerous woman, dangerous feminine sexuality, has served to kind of alienate women from our own sense of self and our own sensuality. So when I did this collaboration with Lisa Levart, as embodying Mary Magdalene, what happened was the day before the shoot, I was looking through these old goddess photos of these goddess figurines that predate definitely Christianity. Most of them predate Judaism. And they're like the Paleolithic goddesses. They're like Ishtar, Inanna, so Mesopotamian goddesses, love goddesses, and all of these figures. They're nude. They're standing totally erect, totally self-possessed in their power, right? Looking directly at the viewer. And there's not any of that coy or that shy or that like, come and get me, or like, I'm just waiting for you to come and you know what? No, it's like I have all of the power within me. And by the way, in Mesopotamia, the downward inverted triangle was a symbol for the pubic triangle, the vulva. And it was the word for vulva, which could be synonymous with woman. And they believed that that was the source of a woman's power. It was vulvic power. And of course, there was the complement in men with the upward facing triangle for the phallus was the source of phallic power, right? So you really get this sense in those figures. And so I was thinking, I realized that that's what I wanted to put in this image, this reimagining of Mary Magdalene, was to resource her with this feminine vulvic power that's, that creates worlds, that's life creative, that's life sustaining. And part of goddess mythology too is that the goddess gives life, she sustains life, she takes life, and she regenerates life. And so it was just really repossessing Mary Magdalene with that. And it's still a process for me. And now that I'm doing my doctoral thesis on menstrual blood is kind of a part of that whole kind of mythos and worldview of the creative, destructive goddess and this vulvic power. So that's what I keep coming back to. It's Mary Magdalene, it's Inanna and Ishtar, and all of these really self-possessed goddesses that are like, you don't own me. I will tell you what feminine sexuality is for me. I have to say too that I really loved some of the other goddesses I encountered in graduate school, like when we got to the Orishas. I loved Oshun, and there is a lot of similarities for me between Mary Magdalene and Oshun. But I don't know the tradition well enough, so I don't know if there was ever a corruption, really. But definitely not in the way that there was in Christianity, I don't think. Because Oshun always, she's just like mother goddess and sensual and like tells you how it is. Yeah. I love her.
Well, I feel like you touched on so much there. But yeah, I think kind of the main themes that are jumping out for me is just, this idea of like, I think it's so connected, right? When we think about the earth and we think about the body and we think about like, those things are connected, right? So I feel like one of the things when we talk about patriarchy, and I want to be very clear, when we talk about, there's a certain thing as like divine masculine energy, and there's patriarchy, and those two are very different things, right? And so I want to recognize that yes, masculinity in a very healthy way is a part of the balance. It's a part of like the whole, right? We need divine masculine, divine feminine. But right now, I feel like we are living in a time of rampant patriarchy. And patriarchy to me is not healthy, because patriarchy is this idea of let's destroy, let's dominate, right? It's a destructive energy to me, right? And so, and it comes across in a lot of different ways. It comes across in how we've dealt with our earth, right? And some of the things that we're dealing with like climate change and like just earth kind of like pushing back is because we have been in this very patriarchal space that says we're not connected to earth. Our job is to dominate earth. Our job is to exploit and to take from and to like, right, and to not honor earth. And earth to me is very much connected to the divine feminine and our bodies. And so this idea of like being here and being grounded and breathing and living and being in our bodies and having sex and eating food and drinking drinks, like that's a very divine feminine energy. And so I feel like we're in this place of patriarchy that doesn't recognize that on a macro level, which shows in the fact that we're dealing with like climate change, we're dealing with all these kind of environmental justice issues. But even on a like kind of a micro level, like in our homes, right? We're having these kind of issues around domestic abuse. And this idea of like the divine feminine is an energy not to respect or to honor, but it's an energy to exploit, to destroy, right? Like, and to interact with fear, right? And so when we talk about Mary Magdalene, I know growing up as I grew up Southern Baptist Christian. And so when I was first introduced to Mary Magdalene as a little girl, right? Like, yeah, she was introduced to me as a prostitute, right? This is a prostitute, not someone worthy of respect. And as I got older, then I started to learn about Mary Magdalene as a disciple and as a master teacher and as this kind of fount of wisdom. Right. And it was totally different from how I was introduced to her as a girl. It's like this kind of throwaway prostitute, this whore, basically. Right. But that was kind of my introduction into how like women who are powerful and who are teachers and who exude this power, like how patriarchy tends to kind of try to shift the narrative on them to make them demons. Like I think about Lilith.
Right.
Who it was, for people who don't know who Lilith is, she was considered Adam's first wife, who was kind of this empowered woman who got represented in Christianity as a demon. Or, Mary Magdalene, who I now recognize as a master teacher and a disciple, who got re-represented as a whore, right? But this idea of like we're going to take these women who have this power and we're going to shift the narrative on them and try to like make them into someone to degrade, to denigrate,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the thing with patriarchy, right, is that it's a power over structure. It's
yeah,
like literally the word patriarchy means rule of the fathers. And it's all about analyzing this rule of the fathers through this system of power dominance, right? That has all of these other threads of dominance underneath it. And
yeah,
what occurred to me as you were talking too is like one of the core tenets of this kind of dominant power system is separateness, right? Like we're all separate. If I'm separate from you, if I don't do the namaste honoring the divine in you, honoring the divine in me, then that means that I'm seeing us as separate, as not interconnected. And I think that's the core of divine feminine consciousness, um, that's showing up in different ways. Ecology, biodiversity systems, right, is it's showing us how we're all interdependent. We need the bees and we need the earthworms. If we don't have them, I actually don't know if we can survive, right? Because they play such a crucial role in the maintenance of the earth, you know? So I was just thinking about the billionaires. Let's just send them. My friend said it was so hilarious. He was like, let's just send all the billionaires to Mars and refuse them reentry unless they pay their taxes.
I've had so many conversations this week about billionaires in space
Oh my
on
God.
different rocket ships, right? Like
I
that's
mean, talk about
a whole different
separateness.
conversation. It's a whole different conversation. But yes, we can have a whole conversation about rich men knee deep in the patriarchy who are like, you know what? I want to spend billions of dollars to shoot out into space.
Yeah, and look how phallic it is. It's like my phallic explosion.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Right.
anyway,
And
that's
it's all
phallic
this
power.
ego, right? Like
Yeah.
all of this is about I want to be the first. I want to compete. I want to be I want to be the first person in a dick spaceship, right? To fly up to Mars. And
Yes,
and yeah, it's a whole conversation.
it is. It is. And
But
so
one of the things that I was, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he shared with me, he and I share a lot of the same spiritual kind of like values. And he shared with me this guy that he was like, check this guy out. He's like, he's super spiritual. He's like, and so I checked him out. And this was a guy who was like, you know what? I don't eat, I don't drink. Um, I fast all the time. I live in my mind. I don't like my body. I'm like trans. And he was just like, isn't this cool? And I was like, if you're into that, yes, right. If you're into this idea of like my idea of spirituality is like I don't eat, I don't drink, I don't touch anybody, nobody touches me, I don't have a body, I'm just consciousness, I'm just the mind out here in the ether, and the more that I do that, the more that I have like no connection to like other people or my body or like eating or drinking or feeling or sensing or intuiting, that makes me more spiritual, then yes. But I don't know. For me, my most spiritual experiences have been in interaction, in touching myself or other people, and eating, and like right. So he had a very transcendent idea of what spirituality was. And for
right,
me, I have had that experience because I think a lot of our mainstream spiritual traditions kind of promote that, right? Like sex isn't a spiritual experience, eating isn't a spiritual experience, like touching yourself, like so I get that, but part of me reconnecting to the divine feminine is like if I'm just sitting here in my body and I'm enjoying a good meal and I'm talking to or touching a person or I'm smelling the air or smelling the flowers or like these very corporeal like experiences are spiritual to me. And that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is just this idea of like sensuality, like being in your senses. And people think of sensuality, I think they tend to think of like sexuality, and that's one part of it. Like if you're in a sexual experience, it's one part. But senses to me, sensuality is in the spiritual place of your senses. So things that I'm smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, seeing, those are all sensual, feminine, spiritual experiences to me, you know?
Yep.
And so, and when I think of a like Oshun, or Orisha like Oshun, yeah, she is someone that I think of as like a sensorial, like in her senses kind
Yeah.
of, goddess. Yeah.
You know, that has me think, one of the things I really love, again, from my limited understanding of Orisha Yoruban tradition and its diasporic elements out into the Americas, like in Candomblé, for example, right? It's like you have all of these rituals. Like I've seen these amazing images of Yemaya or Yimaja, I think is how it's pronounced in
Pronounced a
Portuguese.
lot of different ways.
Yeah,
Yimiya, Moja,
right.
Imaja. Yeah.
There's all of these reaffirming, life affirming rituals that are done to celebrate the goddesses and the gods, right? Like I've seen people pouring champagne into the ocean to worship Yemaya. And, you're going into the ocean to release these floats. You're decorating the deities. You are dressing up. You're dancing together. These are very life affirming activities that is part of the worship and the tradition. So yeah, I think that like sensuousness comes out totally in those traditions.
Yeah. Are
It's
there
the
any other goddesses that for you, I know we talked about Oshun, to me, who's like a very obvious example of like imminence, right? Like Oshun's very much like this goddess of like eroticism and like sensuality and imminence and like kind of being in the body. We talked about Yemiya. Yemiya is more to me of more of like a emotional, kind of like the waters, kind of like feeling goddess. Whereas I feel like Oshun is more like in your body and more like, but either way, they're similar. But, I'm thinking of other goddesses. I know for me, when I think of like Freya, um, from like, I think Freya's like from the Nordic tradition of like more, she's more, to me, she exudes like kind of a sexuality or sensuality. But I guess that's my question for you. Are there other goddesses when we think about kind of like immanence or like being in the body or being like, or like a spirituality that is through a grounded sensual experience? Are there goddesses that you um, like think kind of embody that more?
well, again, I'm a little bit back to Inanna because so many of her myths are about that, right? She has this myth where she's like mature, it's almost like a myth of sexual maturation, and she's like, look at my wondrous vulva, like this is so fantastic. And then there's all of these erotic sexual metaphors in that myth, like then there's like apple or an apple grove or something in the sheepfold. So there's all and it's just trying to think of which myth that's in, but so many of her myths are like related to food and agriculture, and so they're very much integrated in with the material world too, sexuality integrated in with the material world. I mean, this is the thing, she's also, as much as she is a goddess of love and sensuality, she's equally as much the goddess of war, which I guess you could say has its own sensuous in terms of the senses quality. But I see that as a patriarchal a phallic value that's kind of put upon her rather than, than part of who she really is. But again, conversation for another time. Those are really the main goddesses. I'm kind of, Venus and Aphrodite, obviously, these are very also sensual goddesses. I'm thinking a little bit about Persephone and Demeter are coming to my mind because, again, Demeter is the grain goddess, goddess of the harvest. And she has this myth that's similar to Oshun, like where she's really something happens, Persephone's taken and she gets mad and she like withdraws her life force from the world in the same way that Oshun does. And I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. I'm pretty sure there's an equivalent type of myth in the Hindu tradition with Lakshmi, when she who's kind of in a way a little bit like a Demeter figure. She's a mother goddess figure. And anyway, she also withdraws her life force when the gods offend her, when they're really rude. So, you know, yeah. And I really feel like I could go into each goddess individually and kind of talk about how they each affirm embodiment. And Persephone, right? She goes to the underworld every year and then rises again. So there's something really primal about that, time spent under the earth, doing whatever she's doing down there as queen of the underworld and then rising back up. Something about that is super, I don't know, it's sensuous.
Yeah, I think that that's an extremely important part of, for me, what I understand the divine feminine tradition to be. It always involves birth, life, death, and rebirth. Like it always involves that cycle of like, I'm born, I'm living. I realize the way that I'm living is not in the biggest capacity, right? So I go through this death and this rebirth. So it's always this. I think every goddess story for me is a phoenix story. It's a story of like, right, like you go through these cycles. And when you talk about like Persephone, Oshun, all of it, it's this idea of like, I realize that something needs to change, or I realize like I'm not being, you know, respected or honored, whether it's in myself or other people. And I go through this death and I come back from that death like stronger, with more clarity. I think that's for me, that is the goddess tradition, right? That
Yeah.
is this cycle. And so, yeah, I think all of those goddesses, Inanna, Oshun, Persephone,
Yeah.
right? That life and that phoenix story. Um,
Right.
that's a feminine story to me. And I think we live it in our lives, but then also in our bodies, right? Like as we give birth, if we give birth, or even if we don't give birth physically, I think the feminine energy gives birth in so many ways, right? Like whether it's a physical or spiritual or emotional,
Or even an idea. We give birth to ideas all the
right? It's this
time.
idea like it's a creative. It
Right.
creates. It
Right.
creates and it destroys. But
Yeah.
that's a part of creation. Creation is you destroy and create. So I guess as we're nearing our time, and we've gone because we could
Did
talk
we,
about this probably all day.
we did. Oh my God. We were only going to talk for 30
We're
minutes
like, we're
today.
going to talk for 30 minutes, but here we are,
Here we are.
full
Okay.
hour again. Because
But do you feel like you talked about the goddesses you wanted to talk about?
I feel like, yeah, I did.
Okay.
I mean, this is a kind of topic, like really, literally, I could talk about it. I could be here like for hours.
Oh,
So, yeah, given the time that we had, but I just think it's funny that we tried to, when we came into this space, we're like, we're going to limit our time, we're going to do it. And here we are back at, but I think it just speaks to like, to me, how important this topic is. And then
yeah.
there's not so many spaces where you can engage it. So we are nearing our actual time. So I guess that's what I would ask you, Annalisa. It's like, how does we've been talking about like goddesses, and we've been talking about how sensuality shows up in your life, or shows up on it, like in terms of like metaphysical and symbolic ways, but how does it actually show up in your life, or what things are you trying to incorporate, practices, or
Yeah.
thought exercises to like really embody that kind of like sensual, um, yeah, like embodiment.
Yeah, I think, there's this idea that I really love that I from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, right? He talks about walking meditation and like just pure presence to anything that you're doing. So like even doing the dishes can be like a meditative experience, or like a meditative in the sense where you're just totally connected to the divine essence, right? Because you're just being present. So a lot of times for me, it's about being present to the sound of the bird, the hummingbirds that are chirping, and they've kind of been like, so I'm just kind of like being present to the sounds, to maybe like, the air that's the breeze that's running through my hair and on my hands. When I'm, this is specifically for, women here, like when I'm menstruating, I, since I've been writing about it, I've been really paying attention, not even just to the time where I'm bleeding, but I'm really try to come back to all the time how I'm feeling every day in my body. Sometimes I'll go through periods where I'm journaling about that. Um, but I think we get so caught in this, whatever's happening here in the Maya, in the kind of the cosmic play here on Earth, that we are out of tune, many of us, with the rhythms of our body. And we all have different rhythms. There's circadian rhythms, breathing rhythms. I mean, there's so many cycles happening for all of us in our bodies. And so, those are just different ways that I just try to be present, pay attention. If I'm having a coffee, I love fasting, because then when I go back and have something like a coffee, I'm like, oh my God, this tastes amazing. It's like I'm tasting it for the first time. So I think that's it. Like smelling a flower, paying attention to the soft silkiness of the petals, or the different textures. Just if, if there's anything I've kind of learned this last week, there's been a lot of things with the three women the two I didn't know, but the one I knew that died. It's just that, we never know when it's going to be our time. We can't take anything with us when we go, not even our body. So just, I think that the presence, being in the present moment, connecting with other people, connecting with all of our surroundings, like this being in relationship, I think to me is the best way to live the divine feminine and that sensuous quality. There's something about being in relationship that engages the senses. And because we're only here for a blip, right? And then we go wherever we go. I think I know where we go, but I don't really know because I'm not there. Um, so really, I love being here. I love being in my body, even when I'm uncomfortable in my body. I love it. I love people. I love the sounds of the chimes. I just love it. So that's what I would say. Oops, can you see me?
I can now. Yep, it
Okay.
went to your video for a minute, and yeah, I would second that. I think I spent so much of my life not being in my body. Like I'd be eating, but I'd be thinking about something. So I'm not truly like eating, right? I'm not truly present with my food. I'm eating my food, but I'm thinking about tomorrow. I'm thinking about yesterday, right? Like I'm in this headspace. And I think about how much of my life I spent that way, right? Just like I'm moving through life, but in my headspace and in this inner space, I'm always somewhere else. And that space is always either the past, like I'm ruminating about something that happened in the past, or I'm anxious about something in the future. But what I'm not doing is being present. And so for me, a huge part of like connecting to the divine feminine is about being present. If I'm sitting here, am I really here? Am I really here with you Am I really here with my food? Am I really here with these other people? Or am I in this place that I've taught to be, that patriarchy has taught me to be, in this transcendent space that's not present in my body? So that is, you talked about it, and I really resonate with that. It's like, when I am mindful, I really try to be like, am I here? If I'm washing these dishes, am I really washing these dishes right now? Or am I like in the future somewhere, you know? And so that for me is that experience, how to be present, how to be in my body, how to feel that, how to be comfortable in that. And then also how to recognize it as a spiritual experience, because it's not an easy experience. It's not, it is one that I have to conscientiously like think about. Like I have to think about, like, be present, be present. But that for me is the height of spirituality, at least for me right now. It's like, how can I be fully 100% here? Because here is all we really have, right? Like, it's, tomorrow's not here, yesterday's gone. And so this now is really all we have. So like, and honestly, when I'm able to do that, when I'm able to be like fully in the present, I feel most alive. I feel most powerful. I feel like this is it, right? This is it. But it's not always an easy place to get to. But that to me is the divine feminine. When I'm in that space, I feel connected. I feel connected to that goddess energy. I feel, and that for me, I think is really important as we talk about like sensuality and embodiment, that being here, right? Being face to face, smelling, tasting, touching is such a spiritual experience. And I think as we move into this space of like recognizing the divine feminine more, we will recognize that as a spiritual space. But that's where I feel most spiritual, you know?
Yep, I do know. I totally agree.
But it's also not the easiest space because of my conditioning, right? And how I've been indoctrinated and taught. It's not the easiest space, but it's also, when I get there, the most powerful space I think I've ever been in.
Yes.
When I get there, and those false percentages of time where I'm like, I'm here 100%.
Yeah.
But it's difficult. And in this patriarchal world, right, to do that all the time.
Yeah. That's right. It's like, even in those brief moments of like complete here now, I mean, those are gold. Those moments are the gold, you know. And don't beat yourself up if you're not there all the time, you know that. I mean, I'm not talking to you specifically. I'm not talking to you, but
I'm not saying like any of us. Like, I'm not like, even at my big age, right? Like, it's still, I have to fight for that. I have to work for it. It does not come easy to me, you know. And I think, given the kind of world we live in, you do have to like work for it. It is not a world that like promotes that. So
it's like this. It's like a working to let go. It's a working just to let go. And work completely present.
You gotta work to, which seems like a paradox, and it is. Like, you gotta work to like not work, but
it's a little bit of an undoing almost. But
unlearning, undoing. Yes.
So
we are time. We're over time.
Yeah.
But thank you, Annalisa, for the space, for Journey to the Goddess TV.
Thank you. Thank you. And this was such a fun topic, and I can't believe it flew by so quickly.
Yeah.
But it's because it's so fun, I guess. Well, so I just want to encourage everybody to like this video, to share it with your friends, and let us know what you think. I mean, we also get ideas from comments or, you know, conversations that you have with us offline or online in the past. But anyway, so I want to say thank you, everybody, so much for joining us live and after the live as well. And Natasha, it's always a pleasure. And I don't know if you have anything you want to end with as well.
No, that's it. Like, okay. I think our goal is to be here like every other Friday. Life happens. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but I know that every Friday there's different things that are released on Journey to the Goddess TV. So I encourage you to come here. For me, I'm in the process of Annalisa's working on a dissertation. I'm working on a book proposal. So we have a lot going on, but I would encourage you to go to Journey to the Goddess TV. For me, you can track some of my work at thenadomacenter.com, which is an organization that I do that blends spirituality and social justice activism. So, yeah, and our goal is to kind of come together in this space um, every other week. But if not, then we'll figure it out. But every week there's new content here. So come and yeah, we're happy to be here and happy to see you.
Yeah. Yep. Second that. Here. All right. Thank you everybody so much. And thank you again, Natasha. And we will see you all very soon.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.